My name is Ethan Vance, or at least it is now. The Ethan Vance this body belonged to is dead. I, a grandmaster artisan from a realm called the Ethereum, am very much alive. It's an arrangement that works for me. One moment, I was forging a celestial jade meant to stabilize the ley lines of an entire continent. The next, a slight miscalculation, a flash of white-hot energy from a millennium of stored power. And then, this, a new, completely alien place. The sharp scent of antiseptic, a sterile white ceiling, a flimsy blue and white striped hospital gown. My head felt like it had been stuffed with wet concrete. Countless memories that weren't mind-churning like a tidal wave. This body's previous owner was also named Ethan Vance, 23, an orphan. A year ago, through some stroke of cosmic luck, he'd caught the eye of the patriarch of the Thorne family, the wealthiest dynasty in Seattle, and was handpicked to marry the old man's granddaughter, Jessica Thorne. He became the husband who brought nothing to the table, a fixture no one wanted. The good times didn't last. The old patriarch passed away a month ago, and Ethan's already precarious position crumbled. He became a ghost in the Thorne family estate, invisible, stepped on by everyone. Weak and insecure, he finally broke under the constant humiliation and the cold, silent war waged by his wife. He walked into Lake Washington and never came back. What a waste, I muttered, rubbing my throbbing temples. I'd lived for 3,000 years in the Ethereum. I'd seen empires rise and fall, stared down celestial dragons. To end your own life over a few harsh words. It was a shame. Still, I'd taken his body, so I supposed I owed him. From now on, I would live this life for him, and I would live it well. My last life was exhausting, a constant struggle to maintain my title as Grandmaster. This time, I had no intention of competing for anything. This world's spiritual energy was pathetically thin, practically non-existent. It was the perfect place for a retired old soul like me to finally coast. Find a quiet place with a nice view, soak up the sun, carve a little wood, drink some coffee. What could be better? The hospital room door creaked open. A woman in a black power suit walked in, followed by a lawyer clutching a briefcase. She was tall, easily 6 feet in her heels. Her dark hair was pulled back in a severe, elegant bun, revealing a smooth forehead and a neck like a swan's. Her features were sculpted as if from ice, exquisite but utterly devoid of warmth. Her eyes, dark and deep, held a detached, appraising quality. This was the body's legal wife, the CEO of Thorne Industries, Jessica Thorne, the final straw that had pushed the other Ethan over the edge. According to his memories, in a year of marriage, they'd met less than a dozen times, exchanged maybe 10 sentences in total. Every single time, she was as cold and distant as a glacier. Jessica stopped at my bedside, looking down at me not as a person, but as an inconvenient piece of furniture. "You're awake." Her voice was like her presence, chilly, without a ripple of emotion. I just nodded. She didn't seem to need a response. She took a folder from the lawyer and tossed it onto the blanket covering my legs. The soft slap of the folder on the fabric sounded unnervingly loud in the quiet room. "Sign it," she said, her words clipped. I glanced down. Through the cover, I could see the title in bold letters, Divorce Agreement. According to the terms, the condo in Queen and is yours. There's also $500,000 in an account for you as compensation, Jessica stated, her tone as transactional as if she were closing a business deal. Inhumanly calm. "You have 24 hours to consider. I expect to see your signature by this time tomorrow." The lawyer behind her chimed in. "Mr. Vance, please note, the prenup was ironclad. The condo and the cash are a personal and very generous gift from Ms. Thorne." I picked up the agreement and flipped through it. The terms were clear, the legalese impeccable. It was a professional masterpiece. The core message was simple: get lost and never associate with the Thorne family again. The original Ethan would have been devastated, his world collapsing. But I wasn't him. For me, this was a godsend. I'd been wondering how to untangle myself from this complicated, wealthy family, and here she was handing me the escape hatch. "We don't have to wait until tomorrow." I picked up the pen from a nightstand, signed my name with a flourish on the final page, and handed the folder back to her. "It's done." My decisiveness clearly threw them for a loop. For the first time, a flicker of something, surprise, crossed Jessica's frozen features. The lawyer behind her froze mid-motion, instinctively adjusting his glasses. Their script probably had me pegged for a weeping, desperate scene. They likely expected me to cling, to plead, to bring up the old man's dying wish, to try and leech off the Thorne family for the rest of my life. They probably had a whole strategy prepared for my hysterics. And I just signed. Jessica stared at me for 3 long seconds, her eyes searching my face for any hint of pretense, any trace of bitterness or regret. She found nothing. My expression was as placid as a mountain lake, as if I'd just signed a delivery receipt. She had no idea that the man in front of her was no longer the spineless boy she'd married. In his place was a 3,000-year-old soul who found mortal concepts like marriage and wealth utterly boring. Good. She looked away, her voice returning to its usual icy calm. She took the agreement, didn't spare me another glance, and turned to leave. Wait, I said suddenly. She paused, but didn't turn around, only tilting her head slightly. The line of her jaw was a hard, perfect curve. If you're having second thoughts, now's your chance to tear it up, she said, a new note of faint sarcasm in her voice. You're thinking too much, I said, leaning back against the pillows. I just wanted to give you a piece of friendly advice. You've been having trouble sleeping lately, haven't you? Headaches, heart palpitations. Jessica's body went rigid. The lawyer's face changed, his eyes wide with shock. This was Jessica's most closely guarded secret. Crushed by the pressure of work, she'd been suffering from chronic insomnia that had recently become severe. She hadn't had a full night's sleep in weeks, surviving on a cocktail of caffeine and prescription medication. Besides her personal doctor and executive assistant, no one knew. How could I, the husband she treated like air, possibly know? I could see it, of course. To a grandmaster artisan, the human body is like a poorly crafted artifact. Jessica looked polished on the outside, but her inner aura was a chaotic mess. There was a knot of dark energy between her brows. Her life force was thin and scattered, all signs of severe mental exhaustion. She was running on fumes. If she kept this up, she'd be dead from a heart attack within 3 months. That's ridiculous, Jessica snapped, her composure returning almost instantly. Worry about yourself. With that, she clicked out of the room on her heels, her retreat looking suspiciously like a flight. I watched her go and smiled to myself. Fine. We were strangers who had briefly crossed paths. A word of warning was enough to settle any karmic debt. Whether she believed me or not was none of my business. From now on, the world was my oyster. I could finally live my dream life as a bona fide slacker. The discharge process was incredibly fast. The Thorne family's influence was impressive. The moment I signed the papers, everything was arranged. A young man who introduced himself as Ms. Thorne's assistant drove me to the condo in Queen and handed me a set of keys and a debit card, and left with a polite but distant, "Enjoy your new life, Mr. Vance." The condo was a nice 1-bedroom, tastefully furnished, with all new appliances. I pulled open the blinds, and the afternoon sun streamed in, warm and welcoming. I stretched out on the sofa with a deep, satisfying groan. Not bad at all. A place to live, some money in the bank, though I had no real concept of what $500,000 meant in this world. And most importantly, no one to answer to. For the next few days, I lived the life I'd always dreamed of. I slept until noon, ordered from DoorDash, and spent my afternoons on the couch exploring this world artifacts, the television and the smartphone. I had to admit, while this world had no spiritual energy, it was in some ways far more convenient and entertaining than the Ethereum. There was just one problem. The air here was too noisy, not with dust, but with a kind of psychic static. A constant barrage of sounds, lights, and emotions tangled together into an invisible cacophony that grated on the nerves of an old man used to the silent tranquility of a mountain sanctuary. At night, it was worse, a constant hum that made it hard to get any real rest. One afternoon, I was walking through a park nearby when I noticed a discarded log of cedar. It was about as thick as my arm, weathered by the rain, but the wood inside was still solid. An idea struck me. I hauled it back to my apartment. In the Ethereum, besides forging artifacts, my favorite hobby was carving trinkets. Using different woods, I could inscribe them with various patterns. calming sigils, spirit-gathering arrays, to focus the mind, aid sleep, or even ward off minor evils. The wood in this world had no innate spiritual properties, but the material itself was interesting. I found a paring knife and, out on the balcony, began to carve. I didn't have a specific shape in mind. I just saw my hands move. The blade danced across the wood, shavings falling away in fragrant curls. The sharp, clean scent of cedar filled the air. My movements were slow, casual. For me, this was a form of meditation. 2 hours later, a palm-sized, bizarrely shaped carving rested in my hand. It didn't look like a fish or a bird or any animal I could name. It was a weird, ugly, cute little thing. But if you looked closely, you could see its surface was covered in a network of impossibly fine, complex lines that followed some kind of mystical geometry. These were the calming sigils I had inscribed out of habit. Given the lack of spiritual energy in this world, it wouldn't have 1% of its power in the Ethereum, but for something as simple as insomnia, it should be more than enough. I casually placed it on a nightstand in my bedroom. That night, I slept like a stone. It felt like being back in my mountain sanctuary in the Ethereum, all the world's noise sealed away, my spirit sinking into a warm, silent ocean. I woke up to bright sunlight, feeling refreshed and clear-headed for the first time in days. The constant irritation that had been nagging at me was gone. "Guess it worked," I said, picking up the ugly, cute carving with a nod of satisfaction. Meanwhile, in the Thorne family estate in Medina, the most exclusive suburb of Seattle, Jessica Thorne's bedroom was shrouded in darkness, the blackout curtains drawn tight. The air was a mix of expensive aromatherapy oils and the bitter scent of herbal medicine. "Still can't sleep?" Dr. Sharma, the family's private physician, looked at the dark circles under Jessica's eyes with a pained sigh. "Jessica, you can't go on like this. Your body is at its limit." Jessica sat at her vanity, staring at the pale, exhausted woman in the mirror. For a week straight, she hadn't slept more than 2 hours a night. The moment she closed her eyes, her mind was flooded with financial reports, competitors' schemes, and the sneering faces of the old men on the board of directors. Her head throbbed, and her heart felt like it was being squeezed by an invisible hand, making it hard to breathe. Ethan's words in the hospital, insomnia, headaches, heart palpitations, kept replaying in her mind like a thorn she couldn't remove. She dismissed it as nonsense, but her body knew the truth. How? How did he know? "Anya, increase the dosage," Jessica said, her voice hoarse as she rubbed her temples. "Absolutely not." Dr. Sharma refused flatly. "Your body is already building a tolerance. A higher dose will only damage your nervous system. Jessica, listen to me for once. Step away from work. Take a real vacation." "I can't," Jessica said, closing her eyes. "Grandfather left the company to me. I won't let him down." Dr. Sharma looked at her stubborn profile, her heart aching with a mixture of pity and helplessness. Just then, Chloe, Jessica's executive assistant, knocked and entered, carrying a cardboard box. "Ms. Thorne, these are some of your personal items we packed up from the villa." After the wedding, Jessica hadn't moved in with Ethan. Rather, Ethan had moved into a suburban villa she owned. After the divorce, that property was, of course, reclaimed. Jessica rarely went there and had left almost nothing behind. Annoyed and distracted, she waved a hand dismissively. "Just throw it all out." "Wait, Dr. Sharma called out. "What's in there?" Chloe opened the box. It was mostly miscellaneous junk. Suddenly, Dr. Sharma's eyes were drawn to an object in the corner, wrapped in old newspaper. "What's this?" she asked, picking it up curiously. Chloe thought for a moment. "Oh, I think that's something of Mr. Vance's." The cleaning crew found it on a nightstand in the bedroom. Looked like some kind of wood carving, so they just packed it up with everything else. "Mr. Vance." Jessica's brow furrowed at the name. Dr. Sharma tore away the newspaper, revealing the ugly, cute little wood carving. She couldn't help but chuckle. "He carved this? The craftsmanship is terrible. What is it supposed to be?" Jessica glanced at it, a flicker of undisguised disgust in her eyes. It was just like the last time. She remembered the humiliating birthday gift Ethan had given her grandfather, a crude, lopsided wooden figure that their relatives had openly mocked, making her a laughingstock. Throw it away, she said, her voice cold. Oh, don't be so hasty, dear, Sharma said, turning it over in her hands. It's ugly, sure, but this cedar smells wonderful. Here, Jessica, smell this. It's very calming. She held the carving under Jessica's nose. A strange, indescribable fragrance instantly filled Jessica's senses. The scent was faint, yet it had a peculiar, penetrating quality, like a gentle hand instantly soothing the frayed nerves in her brain. The needle-like headache that had tormented her for weeks miraculously began to subside. Jessica's eyes flew open. She snatched the carving from Dr. Sharma's hand. She brought it to her nose, inhaling deeply. Yes, that was it. That was the scent. The fragrance calmed her racing thoughts, and a heavy, long-forgotten wave of drowsiness washed over her. Anya, Chloe, both of you out, she commanded. The two women exchanged confused glances but obeyed, quietly leaving the room. Alone, Jessica clutched the ugly, cute carving and practically stumbled to her bed, collapsing onto it fully clothed. She held the wooden object to her chest like a drowning person clinging to a piece of driftwood. The clean scent of cedar enveloped her, sealing off the noise of the world. The nerves that had been stretched taut for weeks finally, completely relaxed. In less than 3 minutes, the sound of steady, even breathing, filled the silent bedroom. She was asleep, a deep, peaceful, dreamless sleep. It was the best night's sleep she'd had in over 6 months. The next morning, Jessica was woken by sunlight filtering through a gap in the curtains. She opened her eyes, disoriented for a moment by the unfamiliar light and the profound sense of peace. How long had it been since she'd woken up naturally? She instinctively felt around beside her. The ugly, cute wood carving was lying there quietly. Jessica sat up. She felt clear-headed, refreshed, as if months of accumulated fatigue had been washed away. She stared at the carving in her hand, her expression a whirlwind of complexity. A coincidence? Or did he actually know something? No, that was impossible. Jessica immediately shot the idea down. She knew exactly what kind of man Ethan Vance was. A useless freeloader who, aside from being reasonably handsome, had nothing to offer. What could he possibly know? He probably bought this carving for some street fare. As for a calming effect, it had to be a placebo or some folk remedy she wasn't aware of. Despite her rationalizations, she found herself slipping the carving into her handbag. Today was her father Robert's 50th birthday, and the first major family gathering since her grandfather's death. It was being held at the Thorne-owned 5-star hotel downtown, and nearly every influential figure in Seattle was in attendance. As the current head of Thorne Industries, Jessica was naturally the center of attention. She moved through the crowd in an elegant white dress and flawless makeup, a perfect, emotionless machine of commerce. She greeted guests, raised her glass, and smiled, her performance impeccable. But no one knew that inside her designer handbag, her fingers were tightly wrapped around an ugly little piece of wood. Well, Jessica, there you are. We were all waiting for you, a snide voice cut in. Jessica turned to see her cousin, Chad Thorne, sauntering over with a glass of red wine and a smirk that didn't reach his eyes. As the son of her uncle, Chad had always resented her for taking over the company and made it his mission to undermine her at every turn. Where's my uncle? Jessica asked coolly. Dad's inside with some important guests, Chad said, swirling his wine. His eyes raked over her. It's a big day, Jessica. Where's that precious husband of yours? Why didn't you bring him along for everyone to see? He put a heavy, sarcastic emphasis on precious husband. A few nearby relatives snickered. Everyone in their circle knew that Jessica Thorne's husband was the biggest joke in Seattle society. We're divorced, Jessica said, her voice flat. Chad's smirk faltered, replaced by a flash of undisguised glee. Divorced? Huh, that's fantastic. It's about time. That loser was never good enough for the Thorne family. His voice was loud enough for nearby guests to hear, and curious glances were thrown their way. Jessica's expression hardened. That's my private business. It doesn't concern you. How could it be private? Chad pressed, loving the attention. You're the CEO of Thorne Industries. Your marriage reflects on the company's image. You have no idea how people were laughing at us. It's good you finally came to your senses. He wore a mask of condescending concern that made her stomach turn. Oh, by the way, he added, leaning in conspiratorially, I heard Kyle Jensen is here tonight. You know, from the Jensen family? They just secured that massive South Lake Union development deal. They're the hottest ticket in town. Now that you're single, Jess, you should really seize the opportunity. A merger between the Thorns and the Jensens. Think of the possibilities. Jessica's gaze turned to ice. My personal life is not something for you to arrange. She turned and walked toward the head table, leaving Chad scowling at her back, his eyes filled with jealousy and spite. Soon, the birthday banquet officially began. During the gift presentation, guests came forward one by one with their lavish offerings. Rare antiques, fine art, expensive jewelry. When it was Chad's turn, he smugly had his assistant carry in a massive, cloth-draped frame. Dad, I wish you a long and happy life. Chad announced loudly. I searched far and wide to find this painting for you as a birthday gift. He dramatically pulled off the red cloth. A powerful, sweeping landscape was revealed. The canvas depicted layered mountains shrouded in mist, the brushwork bold and the atmosphere profound. My God, is that Julian Roth's final masterpiece? Misty Peaks, an art connoisseur in the crowd gasped. The one and only. Chad puffed out his chest. The genuine article. I paid a fortune to buy it back from a private collector in Europe. This painting alone is worth $8 million. A collective gasp went through the room. An $8 million painting, given just like that. The Thorn heir was certainly throwing his weight around. Robert Thorn was beaming, clapping his son on the back. Excellent, Chad. Excellent. A very thoughtful gift. Chad soaked in the praise and envious looks, then shot a provocative glance at Jessica. The meaning was clear. See this? This is how you show respect. This is real power. What can a woman like you possibly contribute to the family? Just then, a discordant voice piped up from a corner of the room. It's a fake. Nothing to get excited about. The voice wasn't loud, but in the momentary silence, it carried to every corner of the ballroom. Every head swiveled toward the sound. There, leaning against a wall, was a young man in a simple, casual shirt and jeans, nonchalantly popping grapes from a fruit platter into his mouth. It was Ethan. What is he doing here? Jessica's pupils constricted, her heart skipping a beat. They were divorced. What was he doing here? Chad was both stunned and furious. He pointed a trembling finger. Ethan, what the hell are you doing here, you deadbeat? Who let you in? Security. Get security in here and throw him out. I invited him. An old, powerful voice cut through the commotion. The crowd parted to reveal a silver-haired but vigorous old man walking toward them, flanked by an entourage. It was Arthur Hayes, the titan of Seattle's business world, chairman of Hayes Corp. Mr. Hayes, Robert and his brother stammered, rushing to greet him. Arthur Hayes's status in the city was legendary. He was a contemporary of their father, a man even they had to address with the utmost respect. Mr. Hayes gave him a brief nod, but walked straight past them, stopping in front of me with a warm, almost deferential smile. Ethan, my boy, I'm so glad you could make it. I was worried you wouldn't grace us with your presence. The entire ballroom fell silent. Everyone stared dumbfounded. Arthur Hayes, the patriarch of Seattle industry, was speaking to a worthless, disgraced freeloader with such warmth. Calling him my boy. What was going on? Had the world gone mad? Chad's eyes looked like they were about to pop out of his skull. Jessica was just as stunned, her mind a complete blank. She couldn't fathom how Ethan, this man of zero consequence, could possibly be connected to someone like Arthur Hayes. Ethan was just as annoyed. I'd been enjoying my slacker life at home when Mr. Hayes had somehow gotten my address and number and practically dragged me here. He said he was attending an important event and insisted I come along. I tried to refuse, but the old man was so sincere, so humble, that I eventually gave in. Besides, I recognized a familiar scent on him, the scent of the calming incense I had lit at his home a few nights ago. It seemed my casual act of saving him from a stroke had made a lasting impression. Fine, I was here. Might as well get a free meal out of it. I just hadn't expected it to be a Thorn family event. I looked at Chad's face, which had turned the color of a ripe tomato, then at the so-called masterpiece. I couldn't help myself. The comment just slipped out. It was an occupational hazard. To a grandmaster artisan, a crude imitation like this was an insult to the very concept of art. What did you say? Chad sputtered, finally finding his voice. You're calling my painting a fake? Who the hell do you think you are to comment on a Roth? Exactly. What does a kept man know about fine art? He's just trying to get attention, sucking up to Mr. Hayes. He should know his place. The Thorne relatives chimed in, launching a verbal assault. Mr. Hayes frowned, about to speak up for me, but I held up a hand to stop him. I walked leisurely over to the painting, studied it for a moment, and shook my head. The form is there, but the spirit is missing. The brushwork is a deliberate imitation, but it lacks Roth's signature controlled chaos. More importantly, I said, pointing to the artist's signature in the corner, Julian Roth mixed his own paints. His signature crimson had trace amounts of cinnabar, giving it a unique refractive quality under direct light. This signature is flat, dead. It's a standard acrylic, probably colored with a synthetic dye. My calm explanation landed like a thunderclap, stunning the room into silence. Many of the guests were knowledgeable collectors. They had been polite before, not wanting to offend the Thornes by scrutinizing the gift too closely. Now, hearing my analysis, they crowded forward for a better look. After a moment of inspection, their expressions began to change. He's right. The signature is off. And the brush strokes. They're too precise. They feel technical, lacking the raw, organic energy of Roth's work. My God, it really is a high-quality forgery. The blood drained from Chad's face. The painting he'd spent $8 million and pulled countless strings to acquire was a fake. He had just made a fool of himself in front of the entire city. Humiliated, he whirled on me. You're lying. You're just trying to slander me. I have a certificate of authenticity. A certificate? I chuckled. Those are even easier to fake. You. Chad trembled with rage, but couldn't form a coherent sentence. Robert Thorne's face was a mask of thunder. One moment, he was beaming with pride. The next, he felt as though he'd been slapped in public. The mood in the room shifted from envy to a mixture of pity and schadenfreude. Standing in the crowd, Jessica stared at the calm, articulate man holding court, feeling that profound sense of unfamiliarity once again. Was this the same man who used to be so timid in her presence he couldn't even meet her eyes? When had he learned about art authentication? And with such specific, irrefutable details? 1,000 questions swirled around Ethan, shrouding him in a fog she couldn't penetrate. All right, mister, Hayes said, stepping in to smooth things over. Fake or not, it doesn't diminish the sentiment behind the gift. Come, Robert, let me raise a glass to you. Thanks to Mr. Hayes' intervention, the scene was diffused. But everyone there would remember this night. The night that Ethan Vance, once the shame of the Thorne family, had, in front of all of Seattle's elite, exposed the family's heir apparent as a fool. The party continued, but the atmosphere had changed. People now looked at me not with scorn, but with curiosity, with speculation, and even with a hint of awe. The relatives who had been mocking me alongside Chad now gave me a wide berth, as if I were some kind of oracle they were afraid to cross. I was perfectly happy with the quiet, so I found a corner and went back to work on my fruit platter. Mr. Vance, a cool voice spoke from above me. I looked up to see Jessica standing there, holding a glass of champagne. Her expression was the same icy mask, but her eyes were a turbulent mix of emotions. Can I help you? I asked. Who are you? She asked, her voice tight with a confusion she could no longer suppress. I'm Ethan Vance, I answered matter-of-factly. You weren't like this before, she said. Oh, and what was I like before? I asked, playing dumb. My question seemed to stump her. It was true, wasn't it? What did she really know about the me from before? The painting, the wood carving. Where did you learn all of this? She tried again. I'm a natural, a prodigy, I said without batting an eye. She obviously didn't believe me. Her brow furrowed as she stared at me, trying to dissect me with her gaze. Just then, a commotion erupted across the ballroom. Help! It's Mr. Peterson. He's collapsed. We turned to see a heavy-set, middle-aged man clutching his chest, his face contorted in pain as he fell to the floor. Someone call 911. He has a history of heart problems. Where's his medication? The scene dissolved into chaos. The man on the floor was the very Mr. Peterson from the Jensen family that Chad had been trying to set her up with. Robert and Chad's faces went pale as they rushed over. If the head of the Jensen family died at their party, the consequences will be catastrophic. Everyone stand back. I'm a doctor. Dr. Sharma pushed through the crowd and began administering first aid. But Mr. Peterson's condition was critical. His face was turning blue, his breathing was ragged, and he was beginning to convulse. It's no use. It's a massive heart attack. He needs to get to a hospital now. Dr. Sharma said, her own face pale with alarm. The ambulance. Where's the damn ambulance? Chad yelled, sweating profusely. Even without traffic, the nearest hospital was a 20-minute drive. By the time an ambulance arrived and got him there, it would be too late. The tension in the ballroom was thick enough to cut with a knife. I sighed. It was too loud. I just wanted to eat in peace. Why do these things keep happening? I looked at the man writhing on the floor. The aura of death around him was thickening, reaching a critical point. In less than 3 minutes, he'd be gone. Fine. Saving a life is good karma. More importantly, I didn't want a dead body ruining my dinner party. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small sachet. It was something I made in my spare time from a few dried herbs and spices from the garden, mixed according to an old Ethereum formula. I usually used it just to clear my head. I walked to the edge of the crowd and turned to Mr. Hayes. Arthur, got a light? He looked at me, confused, but immediately produced an elegant lighter from his pocket. I took a pinch of powder from the sachet, placed it on a clean saucer, and lit it. With a soft hiss, a thin tendril of blue smoke rose into the air. Instantly, a strange, profound, and indescribable fragrance spread through the room, cutting through the smells of food, wine, and perfume. The scent was light as an orchid at first, but with a deep, resonant note of sandalwood underneath, laced with the faintest hint of wild herbs. It seemed to have a life of its own, seeping into everyone's senses, calming their frayed nerves. The panicked crowd, which had been a chaotic mess just a second before, grew quiet. They felt their fear and anxiety being smoothed away by a warm, invisible hand, a sense of profound peace settling over them. The effect on Mr. Peterson, at the center of the crisis, was even more dramatic. The pained grimace on his face visibly softened. His ragged breathing steadied, and the blue tinge of his skin slowly faded back to a healthy pink. A few seconds later, his tightly shut eyes fluttered open. He looked around, his expression filled with the dazed confusion of someone who had just stepped back from the brink of death. What happened to me? He asked weakly. The room was utterly silent. Everyone stared, frozen, their minds struggling to process what they had just witnessed. A man who was moments from death was just, okay. It was a medical miracle. Dr. Sharma was the first to react. She grabbed Mr. Peterson's wrist to check his pulse. A few seconds later, she looked up, her face a mask of disbelief. His pulse. It's stable. How is that possible? Every eye in the room turned, as one, to the wisp of smoke still rising from the saucer, and to the calm young man holding it. It was him again. It was Ethan. If the art appraisal could be explained away as a niche hobby, how could anyone explain this? This was practically resurrection. Could he be some kind of hidden master? Chad's mouth hung open, speechless. He had been hoping to cozy up to the Jensen family, and their patriarch had nearly died at his father's party. If it hadn't been for Ethan, he couldn't bear to think of the consequences. Robert Thorne's expression was a chaotic mix of shock, relief, and profound embarrassment. And Jessica, she stood rooted to the spot, her heart pounding against her ribs. She stared at Ethan, and suddenly, everything clicked into place. His diagnosis in the hospital, the ugly cute carving that cured her insomnia, and now, this miraculous wisp of smoke. Coincidence? No, there was no such thing as this many coincidences. This man, her ex-husband, was hiding a secret bigger than she could possibly imagine. Just then, Mr. Peterson, who had regained some of his strength, struggled to sit up. His eyes were fixed on me, or rather on the saucer in my hand, and they burned with a new, feverish intensity. You saved me, he stammered, his voice trembling with emotion. That incense, it's divine. It's a divine treasure. He was a businessman, but also a man who deeply believed in things like luck and energy. He had felt himself slipping into a cold, dark abyss, and that strange fragrance had pulled him back. He would never forget that feeling. "Master," he said, his tone shifting to one of reverence. "Please, sell me some more of that divine incense. Name your price. Any price." His words sent a shockwave through the room. Mr. Peterson was one of the wealthiest men in Seattle. For him to offer a blank check for something mint, it was a treasure beyond measure. In an instant, the way everyone looked at me changed. The curiosity was replaced by the same raw, covetous fire that burned in Mr. Peterson's eyes. They were looking at me like I was a walking gold mine. I frowned. I was starting to get a bad feeling about this. I hate complications, and this was shaping up to be a very big complication. I dumped the last of the ash from the saucer into a nearby planter. "It's all gone," I said flatly. "It was just something I mixed together. It's worthless." I turned to leave. "Master, please wait." "Mr. Peterson cried out, struggling to get to his feet. "I'll pay $1 million. No, $5 million. I'll pay $5 million for just a pinch of that powder." $5 million. For a pinch of powder. The guests felt their understanding of the world tilting on its axis. Chad's eyes were practically glowing red. He had spent $8 million on a fake painting and made a fool of himself. And Ethan, this worthless loser, had just turned a pinch of dust into a $5 million offer. It was insane. I didn't even look back. I just kept walking toward the exit. "Ethan." Jessica's voice cut through the noise. She hurried after me, blocking my path. "You can't leave," she said, a new urgency in her voice. For the first time, a crack had appeared in her icy facade. "Why not?" Having second thoughts about the divorce agreement, I raised an eyebrow. "No." Jessica bit her lip, looking as if she was wrestling with a momentous decision. She took a deep breath, met my eyes, and said, word by word, "That agreement. We can renegotiate. Name your terms. Just stay." Jessica's words were like another bombshell, plunging the ballroom into a fresh state of stunned silence. Renegotiate? Name my terms? Was this the same Ice Queen CEO who had treated Ethan Vance like something she'd scraped off her shoe? Chad and his father's faces turned green. They had schemed and plotted to erase the stain of Ethan from their family, to marry Jessica off to the Jensens and consolidate their own power. And now, Jessica was personally inviting the deadbeat back? This was beyond humiliating. It was a public slap in the face. I looked at Jessica. Her gaze was steady, filled with questions and calculations, but above all, the shrewdness of a born predator. She had clearly recognized my potential market value. The sleep-inducing carving, the life-saving incense. In the right hands, these things could bring her, and Thorn Industries, incalculable benefits. "Not interested," I said, without a moment's hesitation. Was she kidding? I just regained my freedom. I wasn't about to jump back in that snake pit. Money? I had no use for it. Fame? In the Ethereum, my name was more renowned than that of any emperor in this world. I was long past caring about reputation. As for her beauty, I could admit Jessica was stunning. But to a 3,000-year-old soul, even the most beautiful face was just a fleeting collection of dust. My only ambition was to be a slacker, to live a quiet, peaceful life. Jessica was clearly unprepared for my blunt refusal. She stiffened, a flicker of uncertainty crossing her usually composed features for the first time. "Why?" she asked instinctively. "No reason. I just don't want to." I stepped around her and continued toward the door. Master, please wait." Mr. Peterson was still calling out desperately behind me. Mr. Hayes hurried to catch up, not to stop me, but to press a gold-embossed business card into my hand. "Ethan, this is my personal number. I know you're a man who values his privacy, but if you ever need anything at all, don't hesitate to call. In this city, I still have some influence." I took the card and nodded, acknowledging the gesture. Stepping outside into the cool night air, I took a long, deep breath. The atmosphere in there was suffocating. I called an Uber and went back to my quiet little sanctuary. In the days that followed, my life finally returned to normal. But for Seattle's high society, the waves I had created were just beginning to crest. The story of what happened at the Thorne birthday party spread like wildfire. Ethan Vance, the useless son-in-law, had transformed overnight into Master Ethan, a man of mysterious and profound abilities. He could spot an $8 million forgery with a single glance. He could bring a dying man back from the brink with a pinch of incense. The rumors grew more and more fantastical. Some said I was the heir of a hidden school of ancient arts. Others claimed I had stumbled upon some lost alchemical knowledge. A few even whispered that I was some kind of celestial being in human form. Countless people were trying to find me, hoping for an artwork appraisal, a miracle cure, or like Mr. Peterson, a pinch of that divine incense. The standing offer for it had ballooned from 5 million to 10 and was still climbing. Of course, none of this concerned me. I was happily oblivious, my only goal to perfect the art of doing nothing. Jessica, however, had not given up. After that night, she started texting or calling me almost every day. The tone shifted from business-like propositions to personal check-ins. The weather is getting colder. Make sure you dress warmly. I had my assistant drop off some seasonal fruit for you. Hope you like it. A new private kitchen opened up on your street. The reviews are excellent. You should try it when you have time. I didn't reply to a single text. I didn't answer a single call. One afternoon, I was sunning myself on the balcony when the doorbell rang. I ignored it. It rang persistently for 10 minutes, then stopped. I figured they'd given up, but a few minutes later, I heard a key in the lock. I frowned. Besides me, there was only one other person who should have a key to this place. The door opened, and Jessica walked in, carrying several grocery bags. She wasn't wearing a power suit. Instead, she was dressed in a soft, cream-colored sweater and jeans, her hair down, framing her face. The look softened her sharp edges, making her look less like a CEO and more like a normal person. She saw me and paused for a second, then acted as if nothing was out of the ordinary, placing the bags on the dining table. I was in the neighborhood and picked up some groceries. I noticed you've been ordering a lot of takeout. It's not healthy, she said, efficiently stocking the items in the fridge as if she did it every day, as if she were the mistress of this house. I watched her, my eyes narrowed. We're divorced, Ms. Thorne, I reminded her. This is breaking and entering. I could call the police. Her hand stilled. She turned to face me, her expression complicated. The condo is still under my name. I just wanted to check on things. She paused, then pulled the ugly cute wood carving from her handbag and placed it on the coffee table in front of me. You carved this, didn't you? She asked. Found it, I lied smoothly. You're lying, she said, her tone certain. I did some research. This pattern, these calming sigils, are only mentioned in a few obscure, ancient Taoist texts. The art is considered lost. It's impossible that you just found it. I raise an eyebrow. So, she'd done her homework. Impressive. And the incense from the party, she pressed on. That was your creation too, wasn't it? An ancient formula. When you diagnosed me in the hospital, you weren't guessing. You're not the Ethan I knew. Who are you? I looked at her face, filled with an insatiable curiosity, and found it faintly amusing. Does it matter who I am? I countered. Ms. Thorne, I doubt you came here today just for a background check. What do you want? Jessica fell silent. She did want something big. She took a deep breath, steeling herself, and pulled another document from her bag, placing it on the table. I want you to join Thorne Industries as a technical consultant. I glanced at the employment contract and laughed. Technical consultant? What techniques do you think I have? Do I understand your financial reports? Your marketing strategies? I'm not talking about those kinds of techniques, she said, her expression serious. The techniques you possess are what Thorne Industries desperately needs. She paused, a trace of exhaustion and helplessness creeping into her voice. To be honest with you, the company is in serious trouble. It turned out that while Thorne Industries looked powerful on the surface, it had been on a downward slide for years. After her grandfather's death, internal power struggles had intensified, and their main competitor, Jensen Corp., had been relentlessly attacking them. Recently, Jensen Corp. Had partnered with an overseas investment firm to launch a hostile takeover. Thorne Industries' stock was in freefall. The board was in a panic. Jessica was under immense pressure, pushed to her breaking point. The Jensens have a shark on their side, a market manipulator who's been bleeding us dry. Our only chance to turn this around is to secure an investment from a man known as Mr. Foam. Mr. Foam sounded like a character from a kung fu movie. Jessica explained. He's a legendary, highly reclusive investor and metaphysics master from Hong Kong. His investment strategy is notoriously eccentric. He doesn't look at projects or profit margins. He invests based on destiny and energy. The Jensens have been courting him for months, sending him priceless treasures, but he hasn't budged. This is our only shot. I got it. She wanted me to use my mystical talents to win over this other mystical investor. That sounds like your problem, not mine, I said, sinking back into the couch. Ethan, Jessica's voice was sharp with desperation. I know I treated you horribly in the past, and I am truly sorry. But Thorn Industries was my grandfather's life's work. I can't stand by and watch it be destroyed. If you help me, I will agree to any condition you name. Her eyes, usually so cold, were shimmering with unshed tears. It wasn't weakness, but the fierce, stubborn pride of someone backed into a corner. I was silent. I couldn't care less about the fate of Thorn Industries. But seeing Jessica like this, something stirred in me. Maybe it was a residual echo of the other Ethan's feelings. Or maybe, in her desperation to protect something she loved, I saw a reflection of my old self. In Jensen Corp, I seem to recall that the original Ethan's suicide wasn't just due to the Thorn family. There were fragmented memories of figures taunting him, shoving him at the edge of the lake. Those figures, I was fairly certain, were some of the younger Jensens. Fine, I said after a moment. I'll help you. On 2 conditions. Jessica's eyes lit up. Name them. First, I'm not your employee. This is a partnership. I help you with Mr. Phone. And after that, you are to leave me in peace. We'll be even. A shadow crossed her face, but she gritted her teeth and nodded. Done. Second, I paused, looking straight at her. I want Jensen Corp wiped off the map. I want them to disappear from Seattle. My tone was casual, but the words made Jessica's heart slam against her ribs. She looked up at me, her eyes wide with disbelief. My expression was not a joke. It was cold, hard, and filled with an absolute, undeniable killing intent. It was a look she had never seen on me or on any other person. It was the look of the grandmaster artisan of the Ethereum. When mortals interfere with my karma, they must be prepared to pay the price. 3 days later, we were at the Pinnacle, Seattle's most exclusive private club. Mr. Phone was staying in his private suite on the top floor. Jessica and I were waiting in the lobby, just 2 more supplicants in a long line. Kyle Jensen, the heir of Jensen Corp., was sitting not far from us, looking smug and arrogant. He caught my eye and smirked. Well, if it isn't Ms. Thorn, here to see Mr. Phone, I'd save your breath. He's only seeing me today. The Jensen family has prepared a truly magnificent gift for him. He patted a heavy-duty, guarded briefcase beside him. Jessica ignored him, her face a cold mask. I leaned back on the couch and closed my eyes, tuning out the world. After an hour, a man in a traditional silk jacket stepped out of the elevator. He was Mr. Feng's majordomo. He walked directly to Kyle. Mr. Jensen, my master will see you now. Kyle stood up, shot us a triumphant, mocking look, and swaggered into the elevator with his entourage. Jessica's fists clenched in her lap. Patience, I said, opening my eyes. The show is just getting started. Another 30 minutes passed. The elevator doors opened again. Kyle and his men were unceremoniously shoved out into the lobby. His arrogant face was now flushed a deep, ugly red, his eyes burning with confusion and rage. Why? Why won't he see me? My gift was a 9-eyed Z bead, consecrated by a living Buddha in Tibet. It cost $100 million. Why wouldn't he even look at it? Kyle roared at the closed elevator doors. The major domo stood impassively in the doorway. My master says your gift carries too much killing energy. He is not fated to receive it. Please leave. The doors slid shut. Kyle looked like he was about to have an aneurysm. Jessica was stunned. She hadn't expected the Jensen's trump card to be dismissed so easily. Just then, the major domo emerged from a different elevator and walked directly to us. Ms. Thorn, Mr. Vance, he said with a respectful bow. My master will see you now. We followed him to the legendary penthouse suite. It was vast, decorated in a classical, minimalist style with a faint scent of sandalwood in the air. A man with a long white beard and hair, dressed in a simple white linen robe, sat cross-legged on a meditation cushion. This was Mr. Feng. In front of him was a low table with an exquisite tea set. "Sit," he said, without opening his eyes. Jessica sat down stiffly on the cushion opposite him. I plopped down casually and, seeing a plate of small cakes on the table, helped myself to one. Jessica kicked me sharply under the table. I ignored her. Mr. Feng seemed unbothered by my lack of decorum. He continued, his eyes still closed. The Jinsen Z bead was indeed a powerful artifact, once owned by a great Tibetan monk 300 years ago. It has absorbed countless prayers. A shame. His tone shifted. The bead recently tasted blood. Fresh blood. To acquire it, the Jinsen family dirtied their hands. Jessica felt a chill. She knew the Jinsens were ruthless, but this was darker than she had imagined. An object stained with blood, no matter how precious, is tainted. "I have no interest in it, Mr. Feng said flatly. I nodded. Makes sense. It's like a prime piece of Wagyu beef that fell in a sewer. You can wash it all you want, but it still stinks of crap." My analogy was so crude that Jessica's face went white with horror. Mr. Feng's eyes snapped open. They were sharp, piercing, like two swords aimed directly at my soul. A lesser man would have broken under that gaze. I simply met his eyes and took another cake. "Stinks of crap, Mr. Feng repeated, and then he laughed. The sharpness in his eyes vanished, replaced by a deep, genuine interest. "Young man, you are interesting." He turned his attention to Jessica. "Ms. Thorne, I hear you have also brought me a gift." Jessica, snapping out of her shock, had Chloe present a silk-lined box. Inside was a translucent, emerald-green jade pendant of the highest quality, said to have belonged to a Qing dynasty prince. Mr. Feng glanced at it once and shook his head. "Good jade, but its spirit is gone. It is an empty shell. Wearing it is no different than wearing a common stone." Jessica's heart sank. Her final gambit had failed. It was over. "Mr. Feng," she began, making one last desperate attempt. "Our project at Thorne Industries." "I don't understand projects, nor do I wish to," he interrupted, waving a hand. "I read people. I read fate. Ms. Thorne, you and your father are both shrouded in an aura of decay. Until that is cleansed, the Thorne family is doomed. Investing in you would be like throwing money into the ocean." His words were a death sentence. The color drained from Jessica's face. She slumped onto the cushion, all the fight gone out of her. It was over. Everything was over. It was then that I, who had been silent, finally spoke up. "Sir, with all due respect, your tea is terrible." I pointed at the priceless antique tea set on his table. Mr. Feng was taken aback. His tea set was a multi-million-dollar masterpiece. The tea leaves were from the original Dahong Pao bushes on Wui Mountain, a harvest so rare it was practically priceless. He was certain there was no finer tea in all of Asia. "Oh, and why do you say that, young man?" he asked, intrigued. "Good tea, good water, good pot," I said slowly. "But the one brewing, it has a scattered mind. When the mind is not calm, the spirit of the tea dissipates. You can't bring out its soul." I stood up, walked over to a planter by the window, and plucked a few ordinary-looking green leaves. Then I asked for a plain glass and a kettle of boiling water. I dropped the leaves into the glass and poured the water over them. There was no ceremony, no complex ritual. It was brutally simple. Yet, the moment the water hit the leaves, an unbelievably pure, crisp, and sweet fragrance filled the entire room. It was 100 times more potent and profound than Mr. Feng's priceless tea. It seemed to carry a power that washed over the soul, clearing the mind and soothing the spirit of everyone who smelled it. Mr. Feng's eyes went wide. He stared at the simple glass in my hand, at the few green leaves floating within, his throat working, his face a mask of utter shock and yearning. What kind of tea is this?" he asked, his voice trembling. "It's not tea," I said. "Just some random weeds from your planter. The difference is I brewed it with a clear mind." I pushed the glass toward him. "Try it." With a trembling hand, Mr. Feng lifted the glass. He didn't drink right away. He brought it to his nose and inhaled deeply, a look of pure bliss on his face. Then he took a tiny, reverent sip. A warm current of energy shot through his body, from the crown of his head to the soles of his feet. He felt his entire spirit being cleansed by this pure, warm stream. All his worries, all his fatigue, all the dust of the mortal world was washed away. He entered a profound state of meditative clarity. Problems of metaphysics he had pondered for decades suddenly became clear, their solutions unfolding before him. The way. I see the way. Tears streamed down Mr. Feng's face. He was shaking with an ecstasy he had never known. This was the enlightenment he had sought his entire life. To think he would find it not in ancient texts or sacred mountains, but in a simple cup of weed water. Jessica was completely dumbfounded. She stared at Mr. Feng, who was clutching a glass of water and sobbing like a child, and felt her entire worldview being shattered, rebuilt, and then shattered again. What was this fever dream? Priceless tea, beaten by weeds from a planter. $100 million artifact and a royal jade pendant, worthless compared to a cup of hot water. This man, her ex-husband. What other secrets was he hiding? After what felt like an eternity, Mr. Feng slowly came back to himself. He wiped his tears, stood up from his cushion, walked over to me, and did something that made Jessica's jaw drop. He dropped to his knees and bowed, his forehead touching the floor in a gesture of utmost respect. Master, please accept this disciple's bow. The room was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. Jessica's mouth hung open. Master? The great Mr. Feng, the master of metaphysics whom billionaires lined up to consult, was kneeling and calling Ethan master. If she hadn't seen it with her own eyes, she would never have believed it. Even I was a bit taken aback by this. What are you doing? Get up, I said with a frown. I will not rise until master accepts me, he declared stubbornly. Master's tea has shown me the great way. I can never repay such a kindness. I can only serve you and listen to your teachings. I felt a headache coming on. This was the kind of annoying persistence I hated most. I'm not interested in taking disciples, I said flatly. Then please accept me as a nominal disciple, he pleaded. No, then, let me be your tea boy. I don't need a salary. I'll pay you. I looked at his desperate, pleading face and sighed. This was ridiculous. All right, just get up, I said, waving my hand in resignation. We can talk about the disciple thing later. First, deal with the matter at hand. I gestured to the still petrified Jessica. Mr. Feng blinked, then immediately understood. He scrambled to his feet, dusted himself off, and regained his sagely composure, though his eyes, when he looked at me, were filled with pure adoration. He turned to Jessica, his demeanor now warm and friendly. Ms. Thorne, I was blind to the greatness before me. Please forgive my earlier rudeness. Jessica, still in shock, could only shake her head numbly. Ahem, Mr. Feng cleared his throat. Regarding the investment, I have made my decision. He paused, then announced in a tone that left no room for argument. I will be investing my entire liquid capital, $3 billion, into Thorne Industries. There will be no performance clauses, no seats on the board. I will require only 10% of the company's shares. Jessica's mind exploded again. $3 billion. All of it. For only 10%. This wasn't an investment. This was a gift. Mr. Feng, are you serious? Jessica's voice trembled. Of course, he said with a small smile. However, I do have one condition. Jessica held her breath. Mr. Feng's gaze shifted to me, his eyes burning with intensity. I wish to have the privilege of consulting Master Ethan on the art of tea whenever he is available. So that was it. The $3 billion was his tuition fee. Jessica didn't know whether to laugh or cry. A crisis that had pushed her to the brink, a problem she couldn't solve with all her connections and resources, had been effortlessly handled by Ethan with a cup of weeds. Not only that, he had brought her $3 billion and a powerful new ally. Yes, of course yes. Jessica answered for me without a second thought. She was now looking at me as if I were a living god of fortune. With the deal settled, Mr. Feng personally escorted us to the club's entrance, his attitude as deferential as a butler's, leaving a fuming Kyle Jensen to stew in his own failure. The car ride back was silent. Jessica kept looking at me, opening her mouth to speak, then closing it again. I was just leaning back, looking out the window, as if orchestrating a multi-billion-dollar deal was just another Tuesday. Ethan, She finally said, thank you, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Don't thank me, I said. It was a partnership. I get you your investment. You destroy the Jensen's for me. We're even. The light in her eyes dimmed slightly. Partnership. He was always so careful to draw that line between them. About the Jensen's. She took a deep breath. With Mr. Feng's capital and connections, I'm confident I can drive their stock into the ground within a month. Then I'll initiate a full acquisition. I will dismantle their entire operation, piece by piece. Her tone was that of a queen pronouncing a sentence. I nodded, satisfied. Good. The car pulled up to my apartment building. I unbuckled my seatbelt. Wait, Jessica said. Aren't you? Coming up. There's a note of hope in her voice she couldn't hide. I looked at her. No need. Don't forget our agreement, Ms. Thorne. Don't bother me again. I got out of the car and walked away without looking back. Watching my retreating figure, Jessica felt a sharp, painful pang in her chest. A feeling of profound emptiness. She realized, with a shock, that somewhere along the way, she had become terrified of this man truly disappearing from her life. My life returned to its peaceful rhythm. For Jessica and the rest of Seattle's business world, however, it was a period of earth-shattering change. With $3 billion and the unconditional backing of Mr. Feng, Thorne Industries roared back to life. Its stock price soared. Jessica went on the offensive, launching a brutal, multi-fronted assault on Jensen Corp. Corporate espionage, market manipulation, poaching key talent. She hit them with everything she had. The once mighty Jensen Corp crumbled, its stock price plummeting towards bankruptcy. All of this happened in the 2 weeks I spent on my couch, drinking Coke and watching movies. Jessica kept her word and didn't come to see me. But her assistant, Chloe, showed up every single day like clockwork, delivering fresh groceries and exotic fruits. Sometimes there was a small card with a handwritten note. It's getting cold. Don't forget a jacket. I bought you some fresh seafood. I included a recipe. I hope you like it. Jensen Corp hit rock bottom today. Thank you. I threw them all away without reading them. The groceries piled up in the fridge. I still preferred the convenience of takeout. One night, I was watching The Godfather when the doorbell rang again. I figured it was Chloe and ignored it. But then, I heard Jessica's voice through the door. Ethan, it's me. Please open the door. I frowned but got up and opened it. She stood there, holding a thermos. She looked tired, but her eyes were bright with the confidence of someone who had just won a war. What is it? I asked, blocking the doorway. Jessica seemed to have grown accustomed to my coldness. She held up the thermos. I made you some chicken soup. I stared at her. The hands that only ever signed billion-dollar contracts were now making soup. There's no such thing as a free lunch, I said bluntly. A faint blush colored her cheeks. Jensen Corp is officially declaring bankruptcy tomorrow, she said. The acquisition is complete. As of today, the Jensen family has no more power in this city. She looked at me, as if expecting praise. I see. My reaction was flat. Her expression fell. This clearly wasn't the response she'd been hoping for. I was hoping you would consider moving back to the villa, she said hesitantly. Why? This place is too small. The security isn't good, she said. And the house is so empty. The last part was spoken so softly, it was almost a whisper. I was silent. After her grandfather died, she was the only one left in that enormous, empty mansion, alone with her cold, lonely empire. I like it here, I said. Her eyes started to look red around the edges. Ethan, she said, her voice almost a plea, I know I was awful to you. Can you give me another chance? A chance to do what? Be your technical consultant? Your spiritual advisor? I scoffed. No, she shook her head, her voice soft but firm. To be my husband. I froze, looking at her face, so full of earnest hope. I felt, for the first time, completely out of my depth. I could face down armies, forge divine weapons, but this messy, human emotion was a territory I had no map for. In 3,000 years, I'd never had a partner. We're divorced, Ms. Thorne, I reminded her. We can get remarried, she said immediately. I'm not interested. Why? The light in her eyes began to fade. Is it because I'm too bossy? Too boring? I can change. I can learn to be a good wife. I can learn to cook, to take care of you. Seeing her so humbled and desperate stirred an unfamiliar irritation in me. The Jessica Thorne I knew was a queen, a warrior in the boardroom, not this small, pleading woman begging for affection. You're fine just the way you are. I cut her off. You don't need to change. I'm the one who's not good enough for you. You deserve better, Ms. Thorne. I took the thermos from her hands, and then I closed the door. Outside, Jessica stood in silence for a long, long time. I leaned against the door, listening to the silence, my own mind in turmoil. I opened the thermos. The rich aroma of chicken soup filled the air. It was still hot. On an impulse I didn't understand, I poured a bowl and took a sip. The taste was mediocre, a little too salty, but as it went down, it spread a strange warmth through me. Jessica didn't come back. My life was finally completely quiet. No more texts, no more calls, no more daily grocery deliveries. It was as if she had vanished. This was what I wanted, wasn't it? But the silence felt empty. The TV seemed boring. The Coke tasted flat. An unsettling restlessness took root in me. One evening, my phone rang. A blocked number. I almost ignored it, but its insistent ringing grated on my nerves. Hello. A distorted, synthesized voice crackled on the other end. Ethan Vance, speaking. If you want your wife to live, come to the old Georgetown steel mill. Alone. And don't call the cops. Or the next time you see her, it will be in a body bag. The line went dead. My mind went blank for a single frozen second. Wife? Jessica? Kidnapped? And then an ice-cold volcanic rage erupted from the deepest core of my being. I, the grandmaster artisan of the Ethereum, had lived for 3 millennia. I was the one who pulled the strings. When had anyone ever dared to threaten me? And to threaten me with someone who was under my protection. They're courting death. My eyes narrowed. The temperature in the room plummeted. The can of Coke on the coffee table frosted over. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed my jacket and bolted out the door. Call the police? I was the judgment they were about to face. And not even God could save them now. The old Georgetown steel mill was a skeleton of rusted metal against the night sky, a graveyard of industry. Inside a dilapidated warehouse, a single dim bulb cast long, dancing shadows. Jessica was tied to a steel support pillar, duct tape over her mouth. Her face was calm, but a flicker of fear shone deep in her eyes. Standing before her was Kyle Jensen and a handful of thugs. Kyle was a wreck. The arrogant air was gone, replaced by a wild-eyed, desperate man who had lost everything. Surprised to see me, Jessica? Kyle spat, his voice dripping with venom. You ruined my family. You destroyed my life. Tonight, you pay for it in blood. One of his cronies, a man with bleached blonde hair, spat on the floor. Kyle, why waste time talking? Soon as that deadbeat husband of hers shows up with the money, we kill him, then we sell this bitch to a cartel. Let her see what real despair feels like. Jessica's heart sank. She wasn't afraid to die, but she was terrified that Ethan would actually come here alone. No, she thought, a bitter taste in her mouth. He won't come. He hates me. He'll be glad to be rid of me. It was for the best, as long as he was safe. You sure he'll even show? Another thug asked nervously. He'll come, Kyle sneered. I did my research. The guy is a pathetic loser. His only connection to power is her. With her in our hands, he has no choice but to obey. They had no idea who they were dealing with. They had no idea what kind of ancient, terrible power they had just provoked. Suddenly, the warehouse's massive, rusted door was kicked open with a deafening crash. A figure stood silhouetted against the moonlight. The air grew cold, a palpable aura of menace washing over the men inside. Who's there? The blonde thug asked, grabbing a steel pipe. The figure didn't speak. He just started walking toward them, his steps silent, yet each one landed like a hammer blow on their hearts, stealing the air from their lungs. He stepped into the light. It was me. Ethan. Kyle froze, then burst into manic laughter. You actually came? You pathetic fool. Did you come here to die? Tied to the pillar, Jessica's eyes widened, and tears immediately began to stream down her face. He came. He really came. To save her. I ignored Kyle. My gaze was fixed on Jessica, on the angry red mark where the tape was cutting into her skin. The killing intent in my eyes intensified. Let her go, I said. My voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of an avalanche. Let her go. Kyle cackled. Are you insane? You're in no position to make demands. Get on your knees. His thugs closed in, brandishing their weapons. Nighty-night, asshole, the blonde one snarled, swinging the steel pipe directly at my head. Jessica squeezed her eyes shut, a strangled sob escaping her lips. But the sickening crunch she expected never came. Instead, there was a sharp, clean snap of breaking bone. She opened her eyes. The thug was frozen, his arms still raised, but his wrist was bent backward at an impossible angle. I hadn't moved. No one had even seen me move. A delayed scream of agony tore from the man's throat as he collapsed, clutching his shattered wrist. Everyone was stunned into silence. Kyle's laughter died in his throat. What? What did you do? He stammered. I didn't answer. I just started walking toward him. The other thugs were paralyzed with a primal fear. They felt like they were facing not a man, but some ancient predator. Get him! Kill him! Kyle shrieked. His men, spurred by his desperate yell, charged. I shook my head. Ants. As they closed in, I moved. It wasn't a fight. It was a dissection, a simple tap to a nerve cluster in the neck, a light touch to a pressure point on the chest. One by one, they collapsed like puppets with their strings cut, crumpling into boneless heaps on the floor. They weren't dead, or even bleeding. They just couldn't move. All they could do was lie there and stare at me with pure, unadulterated terror. It was a simple nerve-locking technique I used to use on unruly beasts in the Ethereum. On these mortals, it was laughably effective. In seconds, only Kyle was left standing, or rather, scrambling backward on the floor, his face a mask of terror. Stay back. What are you? Are you even human? I stood over him. I gave you a chance, I said. Then, I slowly brought my foot down on his knee. A scream of pure agony echoed through the abandoned mill. I didn't kill him. Death was too easy. I left him broken, a living monument to his own stupidity, destined to spend the rest of his life in a world of pain and regret. When it was done, I turned and walked toward Jessica. She was staring at me, her mind reeling. The entire confrontation had lasted less than a minute. It was brutally efficient, devoid of struggle, yet more terrifying than any fight she could have imagined. I reached her and gently peeled the duct tape from her mouth. It pulled at her skin, drawing a tiny bead of blood. I frowned. She didn't seem to feel the pain. She just looked at me, her lips parted, tried to form words that wouldn't come. I reached out to untie the ropes. My fingertips brushed against her cold skin. She shivered. I paused. It was the first time we had ever touched like this. Just then, the wail of sirens grew louder outside. One of the thugs must have called the police. Fine. I quickly undid the ropes. The moment she was free, her legs gave out. She slumped forward, and I instinctively caught her, pulling her into my arms. She was so light, so fragile. Her body was cold, but she smelled faintly of flowers. My heart, for some reason, skipped a beat. I thought you wouldn't come, she whispered into my chest. If I didn't, who would identify your body? I said, my words harsh, but my arms held her tighter. She buried her face in my shoulder and wept, her silent tears soaking my shirt. The police burst in to find a bizarre scene. A woman crying in a man's arms, surrounded by a group of kidnappers twitching on the floor like landed fish. Freeze! Police! The lead officer yelled, pointing his gun at me. I didn't move. I just held her. Jessica looked up. Captain Miller, it's me. The captain's eyes widened. Ms. Thorne? What happened here? The rest was a blur of procedures. Jessica was the victim. I was the heroic ex-husband. As for how the kidnappers ended up paralyzed, I just said I'd seen something on TV and tried pressing a few of their pressure points. It was a ridiculous explanation, but with no other evidence, they had little choice but to accept it. It was nearly dawn when we finally left the station. Jessica's assistant Chloe was waiting, frantic. Ms. Thorne, are you all right? I'm fine, Jessica said, then she looked at me. I'll take you home. I didn't argue. We drove in silence, not to her mansion, but to my small apartment. I'll walk you up, she said when we got out. You don't have to. I insist. Her tone left no room for argument. We stood in my small living room. The air was thick with unspoken things. Let me get you some water, I said, turning to the kitchen. She followed me in. In a cramped space, we were standing so close I could feel the heat radiating from her skin. Ethan! Suddenly, she wrapped her arms around me from behind, holding on tightly, her face pressed against my back. I could feel her body trembling. "Don't push me away again. Please." Her voice was a choked, desperate whisper. "I was wrong. I was so wrong. Please, don't leave me." The glass in my hand froze halfway to the faucet. My heart felt like it was being squeezed. It ached. I slowly turned around in her arms to face her. She was a wreck, her perfect makeup ruined by tears, her proud face filled with a raw vulnerability I'd never seen before. I sighed. I reached up and gently wiped a tear from her cheek. "You idiot," I said. Then I lowered my head and kissed her. It was a clumsy, inexperienced kiss. For a 3,000-year-old hermit and an ice queen, it was new territory. But it was filled with a heat that could melt glaciers. When we finally broke apart, she was breathless, her face flushed a deep crimson. She rested her forehead against my chest, unable to meet my eyes. "We should probably get the paperwork to remarry sorted out," she mumbled. I looked down at her, so serious and so flustered, and I laughed. "In such a hurry to tie yourself to me again." "I was always yours," she muttered, her voice so quiet I almost didn't hear it. My heart melted. Fine. Maybe the slacker life was overrated. Maybe having someone to share it with wouldn't be so bad after all. The next day, we went to the courthouse. Holding the new marriage certificate, Jessica beamed, a genuine, radiant smile that transformed her entire face. I had never seen it before. It was beautiful. Our life began a new chapter. I was still a slacker who enjoyed watching TV. She was still a powerhouse CEO, but everything was different. She moved into my small apartment. She came home every night, no matter how late. She tried to learn to cook for me, with disastrous but endearing results. She would curl up against me on the couch and fall asleep with her head in my lap. And I got used to having her there. I made sure she slept soundly every night. I brewed her special teas to help with her stress. And I told her stories of the Ethereum to make her laugh. The world didn't stop bothering us, of course. Mr. Phone would show up regularly to discuss tea and steal my food. Mr. Hayes would send small gifts that were really just requests for me to check his mansion's energy flow. The rest of Seattle high society constantly tried to get an audience with Master Ethan. I delegated all of it to Jessica. She handled it with relish. A husband and wife team, she called it. She loved being Master Ethan's wife. One evening, we were walking in the park, the setting sun painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. She had her arm linked through mine, her face glowing with a quiet happiness. "Ethan, you still haven't told me who you really are," she said, looking up at me, her eyes sparkling. I smiled down at her. I reached out and gently tapped the tip of her nose. "I'm me," I said. "I'm the man who is going to be with you for the rest of your life. Your husband." She stared at me for a moment, and then her eyes curved into crescents as she broke into that brilliant smile. She stood on her toes and gave me a soft kiss on the cheek. "Yes," she nodded emphatically. "My husband." The sunset stretched our shadows long behind us. Maybe I wouldn't get my life of perfect, undisturbed peace. But I had her, and that, I decided, was a much better deal. Bonus scene 6 months later, at the Thorne Industries annual gala. As the CEO's consort, I was bored out of my mind, sitting in a corner and eating an apple. Suddenly, a familiar, annoying figure appeared at my side. It was Chad. He'd been demoted to some do-nothing department, his days of influence long over. "Ethan, my man," he said, holding a glass of champagne with a sycophantic grin. "Let me toast to you. I was an idiot before. You're the bigger man. I hope you can forgive me." I ignored him. He downed his drink anyway, then leaned in conspiratorially. "Listen, you're not going to believe this, but I met this incredible guru, a real enlightened master. He gave me this marrow cleansing pill, said it would completely purify my body, make me immune to all diseases." He proudly took out a small, ornate box. I caught the scent of a familiar, low-grade alchemical concoction. I took the box from him, opened it, and saw a lumpy, dark brown pill that smelled vaguely of burnt sugar and herbs. I sniffed it, then popped it into my mouth, chewed thoughtfully, and swallowed. "Not bad," I pronounced. "A little too sweet, though." Chad stood frozen, his face a perfect picture of horror. The $50,000 miracle pill he'd bought from his guru had just been eaten like a piece of candy by me.